My sister didn't even flinch when I walked in. She didn't turn her head, didn't break her smile for the guests, didn't acknowledge me, not even with a glance. The charity gala she organized was her moment. Candles floated on crystal vases across every table, golden ribbons wrapped the chairs like gifts, and a string quartet played something elegant that barely reached the back of the room. Everyone looked like they belonged. Everyone except me. I walked past a group of men in tailored suits and women in shimmering dresses, each glass of champagne held with care, their laughter light and rehearsed. I wore black, not the glamorous kind, just a simple, clean-cut dress. It felt like a uniform, not for the gala, but for the life they never asked about. She spotted me eventually. Claire, my sister. Her eyes scanned past me once, then came back with that tight, practiced smile. The kind that doesn't move the eyes. The kind that says, "Why are you here?" "You're late," she said quietly, stepping away from her fiancé, just long enough to throw the words over her shoulder. I didn't reply. I just nodded. My heels clicked too loudly on the marble floor, each step echoing in a silence no one else seemed to hear. "Are you here alone?" she asked next. Not because she cared, because it mattered. Because appearances always mattered with Claire. "Yes," she sighed. "Well, try to stay in the back. This isn't really your kind of crowd." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I moved to a corner table near one of the large bay windows. From there I could see everything. Her friends, their polished lives, their curated conversations about vacations and renovations, and who got invited to whose fundraiser last spring. I wasn't part of it. Never had been. The waiter didn't bring me champagne. He skipped my table twice. No one recognized me. No one remembered I was Claire's sister. No one wanted to. She told them I was away, traveling, studying, finding myself, always vague, always distant. In truth, I'd been working, hard, relentlessly, in ways no one at that gala could begin to understand. As the night wore on, I watched her take the stage. Spotlights kissed her blonde hair. She wore a midnight blue gown that clung like it had been made for her alone. The applause was immediate. Cameras flashed. Her name echoed around the ballroom like royalty. Claire Bennett, the successful one, the beautiful one, the one who hadn't vanished for 6 years. I sipped water from a plastic cup I'd asked for myself and swallowed the taste of metal. She never once mentioned me during her speech. Not when she talked about family. Not when she thanked her parents, who didn't show up, ironically. Not when she talked about growing up surrounded by support. I'd been 16 the last time she called me her sister. Now, she barely remembered I had a name. And yet, something in her eyes, just for a second, when they flicked toward the back of the room, it wasn't disdain. It was discomfort. Like maybe, just maybe, she remembered what I used to be. What I might still be. Or maybe she'd heard a rumor. Maybe someone, somewhere, had told her just a whisper of the truth. I stayed silent, because they all thought I was paranoid, but I knew something they didn't. And it was only a matter of time before someone else walked through those doors, someone who knew exactly who I was. I remember the last time Claire spoke to me like I mattered. It was the day I left home. She stood at the doorway of my bedroom, arms crossed over her designer hoodie, nose scrunched like the very air offended her. "You're really doing this? Leaving?" I was stuffing the last of my clothes into a worn-out duffel bag. No labels. No wheels. Just cloth and zippers in desperation. "Yeah," I said, not looking up. She scoffed. "To go where?" "Some mystery school. You don't even have a college acceptance letter." I zipped the bag slowly. I didn't need her approval. I didn't even need her understanding. But I think, back then, a part of me still wanted her to say something else. Anything. "I got in," I muttered. "It's classified." That made her laugh. Not the fake kind she used at parties, but the cruel, sharp one she saved for when she thought she was better than me, which was often. "Right. Of course. Let me guess, secret agent school. Maybe you'll be a ninja. Or a ghost. You're already halfway invisible." She left before I could answer. That was her way. She never stayed long enough to hear the part of the story that didn't fit her version. No one in the family asked where I went after that. Mom told people I was taking a gap year. Dad said I was sorting myself out. At every Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas brunch, or family reunion I missed, I became more myth than memory. I could feel myself fading from their lives even as I built something solid from the ashes they left behind. I was 18 when I disappeared. 18 when I signed a document in a gray room with no windows and no clocks. The man across from me had no name, only a badge that wasn't a badge and a voice that spoke like a loaded weapon. He asked me one question: "Are you willing to become someone no one will ever thank?" I said yes. The years that followed broke me open and stitched me back together in ways I never knew were possible. I trained in places no map could show, alongside people who didn't exist on paper. I learned silence, observation, the power of stillness, how to vanish in plain sight, how to survive without applause. We weren't soldiers. We weren't spies. We were something between, a shadow force built on need and anonymity. No medals, no ceremonies, just results. I saw things no one back at that charity gala would ever believe. I held the hand of a child in Kandahar as her village crumbled behind us. I sent coded warnings that saved embassies from being turned to rubble. I carried intel across borders with nothing but a smile and a false name. And every time I returned, to the compound, to the silence, to the life I'd chosen, I was reminded of the cost. You don't get to be known. You don't get to explain. But I never regretted it. Not even when I saw the headlines Claire sent around our family group chat. Her graduation from Columbia, her law internship in D.C., the engagement at the vineyard with fairy lights and filtered photos. I never replied. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't. If I answered, I risked everything. And the truth is, they never asked. They'd already written me out of a story. I was the one who left and never looked back. The one who couldn't keep up. The disappointment. At every family event I missed, Claire became more polished, more perfect. Her words were smoother. Her dresses tighter. Her circle richer. She rose like cream in coffee, easy, effortless, admired. And me? I was busy dragging bodies out of ditches and pretending not to exist. I remember one night, in Berlin, sitting on a rooftop after a long assignment. The cold bit through my coat. I watched a family laugh through their dinner on the top floor across from me. The table was warm, full, chaotic. A little boy spilled his drink, and everyone laughed. The mother wiped it without missing a beat. I hadn't spoken to anyone who knew my real name in months. And I miss Claire. Not the version she became. The sharp-tongued, polished woman who only saw value in visibility, but the girl who used to hold my hand under the table during thunderstorms. The girl who once whispered, "Don't worry. I'll always be your big sister." But somewhere between those years and now, something fractured. She built a tower of her own brilliance, and I wasn't part of it. She climbed and climbed, and I was just a ghost that didn't fit in the family album. So when the invitation came, her engagement gala, it wasn't mailed to me. It was emailed to a generic account, one she probably didn't know was monitored. Maybe she sent it out of obligation. Maybe she thought I'd never show. But something told me to go. Not to be seen, but to remember who I was, and to see if she remembered too. I walked into that ballroom, knowing what they thought of me. That I was the weird one. The failure. The paranoid sister who never settled down, never built a life, never made anything real. Claire once told someone at a party that I struggled with reality. I didn't blame her. It's easier to believe that than to imagine your sister is out there, doing things the world isn't allowed to know. But now something was shifting. Because earlier that week, a man in a dark suit, someone whose presence silenced an entire operations room, looked at me and said, "You're going to that gala?" I nodded. He paused, then said, "You've earned it." Those 3 words rattled something in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I would soon, because something was coming. And this time, it wasn't me walking into her world. It was her world about to collide with mine. The first real crack in the evening came when Claire's fiancé, Thomas, took the microphone. Up until that point, the night had unfolded with clinical precision. Glasses refilled before they emptied, laughter erupting on cue, a saxophone player weaving jazzy warmth into the chandelier-lit air. Claire glided from guest to guest like she was made of light, always in control. Then Thomas stepped onto the small stage. He wasn't nervous. No, not exactly. But he carried that same kind of practiced charm Claire wore like perfume. Tall, silver-tongued, with a political pedigree and a resume built for headlines. He looked down at her from the microphone with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "If I could steal a moment of your time," he began, "I'd like to say something about the woman I'm going to marry." The room hushed. Claire beamed, her chin high, her champagne barely raised. I stayed in the back, hidden in the dim halo of a decorative ficus. "I've known Claire for almost 5 years," he continued, "but I knew I wanted to marry her the first time I saw her in court, tearing apart a witness with surgical precision. Laughter. She's brilliant. She's fierce. And let's be honest, she's terrifying in heels. More laughter. A few guests clapped. And I've met her friends, her mentors, her colleagues, even her dog, which, let's be clear, is more emotionally complex than most people I know." Claire laughed now too, dabbing the corner of her eye like this was the Oscars. "But tonight," Thomas said, shifting slightly, "I realize there's one more person I haven't met. Or at least not properly. Someone who, I'm told, is very important to Claire's story." The air thinned. I didn't move, but my heart did. Claire's smile faltered, just slightly. Her eyes darted to the edge of the room, toward me, then away. Thomas looked toward the crowd. "She's here tonight. Claire's sister." People turned. Slowly, like dominoes shifting toward the unexpected. I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes steady on Thomas. "I don't know much about her," he continued, and his voice was still smooth, still rehearsed, except that she's, let's say, elusive. Polite laughter. Uneasy. And according to Claire, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. Chuckles, more forced this time. Claire didn't laugh. She looked down. Thomas raised his glass. "But family is family, right? So here's to welcoming everyone, even the ones who walk strange paths." The toast hung in the air like fog. Glasses clinked hesitantly. I didn't raise mine. That was it. No name. No recognition. Just a wink and a jab dressed in formal wear. A quiet humiliation wrapped in pleasantries. I felt something slide loose inside me, not anger. Not shame. Just detachment. I wasn't supposed to be there. And they had no idea who I really was. Across the ballroom, 2 men entered through the east entrance. Dark suits, clean lines, earpieces that glinted for only a second in the light. They didn't look around. They walked directly toward me. My heart didn't race. My breath didn't catch. I was trained for moments like this. But I wasn't prepared for this moment. Not in front of Claire. Not here. The shorter of the 2, a man with steel gray hair and the posture of someone who hadn't bent in years, stopped a few feet from me. He didn't speak at first. Just looked. And then he said, loudly, "Ma'am, we need you. Now." People turned. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Claire looked up from her seat. The man took another step forward, eyes never leaving mine. "Your clearance is active. Protocol 7 was breached. Immediate decision required." Then came the sentence, the one that shattered the room. "We were told to wait for your call, Agent Westfield." The room went still. Completely. My full name hadn't been used in years. Not in public. And certainly not here. Whispers erupted. "Agent? Who? Did he say Westfield?" Claire stood up. Her glass clinked softly against her plate. She looked like she'd just swallowed something sour. Thomas looked from me to the man, then back again, his carefully molded confidence cracking. I nodded once, turned toward the agents. But then, the gray-haired man said something else. Something I hadn't expected. Louder this time for the room. "She's one of ours," he said. "Trained by the directorate. Cleared at the highest tier. She saved more lives than anyone here will ever know." He looked directly at Claire now. "And she deserves more than your silence." Gasps. Audible. Claire blinked. Her mouth parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I met her eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just let the weight of the truth sit there, thick and undeniable. Someone nearby whispered, "Is she CIA?" Another. She was in the room. The murmurs built like rising water. I turned to leave, but just before I did, the man added one last sentence, not for me, but for them. "For the record," he said, "she's not paranoid. She's precise. There's a difference." And then we walked out. Not quickly. Not quietly. The door shut behind us with the softest click, and in that moment, the illusion shattered completely. Everything they thought they knew about me, every cruel joke, every dismissive glance, every smug assumption, burned to ash. And Claire, she just stood there, still holding her glass, still trying to figure out who the hell I really was. The doors behind me closed with a muted finality, sealing the room and everyone inside, their gasps, their stares, their unraveling certainty away from me. Outside, the air hit cold against my skin. Not because of the weather, but because everything had shifted. 4 years, my identity was an invisible thread woven through operations, intel and silence. But now it had a voice. The man beside me, Director McKinley, yes, that McKinley, walked at a measured pace, his hands clasped behind his back. People moved out of his way without thinking. His presence carved silence through the hotel corridor like a blade. "I apologize for the timing," he said, voice even, eyes ahead. But when the South Ridge situation came through, there was no one else I could trust. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The South Ridge wasn't just a breach. It was a signal. Something had shifted in the network. Someone high up had flipped. "What's the damage?" I asked. He gave me a side glance. "That's what we need you to assess." 2 more agents, this time from CyberOps, joined us near the elevator. They handed me a secure tablet. Encrypted files streamed in as I scanned names, faces, movement patterns. This was no routine scramble. It was coordinated, internal, and I was the only one who had clearance to read all layers. "I'll need access to Tier 6 archives," I said. "You already have it," McKinley replied. "The president signed off 5 minutes ago." I nodded. That's how it worked. No medals, no applause. Just doors that opened when the world was burning. But even as I moved toward the vehicle waiting outside, the sleek black SUV with diplomatic plates and 3 layers of shielding, my thoughts circled back to that room. To Claire. To the way her face cracked in front of everyone when McKinley said my name. When he said, "Agent Westfield," like it carried weight. Like it belonged in history books, not hidden in whispers. She had spent years telling people I was unstable. She mocked my silence, turned my absence into some cautionary tale of failure. And all the while, I was saving lives. I had stood in war rooms beside prime ministers, sat in tactical briefings with commanders who only spoke when I did. I had dismantled weapons caches buried beneath cities and extracted diplomats from compounds where no one else could go. And yet, my own sister believed I was broken. Or maybe she needed to believe that. Because the truth, it threatened everything she had built. Her success came from perfection, polish, and proximity to power. Mine came from blood, grit, and the kind of trust that only exists in shadows. The drive across the city was quiet. Streets blurred past as the team debriefed over comms. I gave directives, rerouted assets, marked a target for surveillance. It was second nature now, like breathing. But the silence inside me, that was new. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just a ghost. And it wasn't over. 3 hours later, I returned. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. The South Ridge breach had been neutralized. The traitor identified. My directive was clear. But there was one last thread left untied, and it was still standing inside that ballroom. When I entered again, the air was different. Like a pressure system had shifted. People whispered, moved aside. Eyes darted. No one blocked my path this time. The room that once ignored me now watched in stunned silence. I didn't speak. Not yet. Claire stood near the dessert table, her glass untouched. Her perfect smile had vanished. The mask was gone. When she saw me, she didn't pretend. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stopped 3 feet from her. "You lied," she finally whispered. "All these years, you let me believe." "I didn't let you believe anything," I said calmly. "You decided what was easier to accept." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with the kind of panic that comes when the illusion crumbles. Thomas appeared behind her, his earlier smugness deflated. "Is this real?" he asked, more to himself than to me. "You're really—" "I am," I said. "But Claire said—" "Claire says a lot of things." That shut him up. I turned to the crowd. Not to boast. Not to explain. Just once, to let them see. My name is Agent Evelyn Westfield, I said, voice steady. I work under the authority of the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. My clearance is above level 6. I've spent the last decade operating in sectors where your GPS doesn't reach. No one breathed. I don't need your approval. I never did. Claire stepped forward. Her voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, really looked. And I saw the girl who used to braid my hair. The teenager who laughed with me in the dark. The sister who once promised she'd never let me disappear. I tried, I said. You called it paranoia. She flinched. And then, just behind me, McKinley stepped through the doorway again. Alone this time. No guards. No entourage. Just the weight of his name. The crowd split like water around him. He walked to my side and nodded to me, then turned to Claire. You must be the sister, he said. Claire swallowed. Yes. He studied her for a beat, then said, You should be proud. Then louder to the room. This woman saved your country more times than your newspapers will ever print. She's made decisions no politician had the courage to sign. And tonight, she came here as a guest. He turned to me, offered a simple nod. When you're ready. Then he left, leaving only the truth behind. The crowd didn't applaud. They didn't move, because sometimes silence is louder than ovation. And this time they heard me. I stayed for exactly 9 more minutes. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me needed to see the aftermath. Not the chaos, there wasn't any. No screams, no breakdowns, just quiet confusion, shame curling around the edges of tuxedos and designer gowns. People avoided my eyes now. The same people who hadn't even noticed me an hour before were suddenly obsessed with their phones, their drinks, the stitching of their napkins. Their silence wasn't rudeness anymore. It was discomfort. It was the uncomfortable realization that they had misjudged someone deeply. But Claire? She hadn't moved. Still standing near the dessert table, her fingers clenched around the stem of her untouched glass, her knuckles pale. I walked past her on my way out. She didn't stop me. But just as I reached the exit, she said it, low, barely above a whisper. Evie! That name. I hadn't heard it in years. Not from her. Not from anyone who still mattered. I turned. She looked smaller than I remembered. Still beautiful. Still graceful. But hollow. Her world had cracked open in front of everyone, and she didn't have the tools to hold it together anymore. You should have told me, she said. I studied her. The trembling lip. The confusion. The ache. But not once did I see pride. Not once did she say I was wrong. And that's when I realized she wasn't sorry for how she treated me. She was sorry for how it made her look now. I did, I said softly. You just didn't listen. Her eyes filled, but I didn't wait to see the tears fall. I stepped outside. The cold night air brushed against my face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. Not because I had been revealed, but because I didn't need the revelation anymore. I walked toward the waiting vehicle, the same black SUV from before. Inside, 2 agents sat in silence. One glanced at me in the rearview mirror and nodded, the kind of nod that carried more respect than 1,000 handshakes. Where to, Agent? He asked. I paused. I could have said D.C. I could have said the safe house. I could have said the South Ridge checkpoint. But I just said, drive. And we did. Through quiet streets, past midnight neon signs, into the parts of the city that didn't care who you were, only who you were becoming. I watched the buildings blur past and let myself feel it. The ache of being invisible. The strange pain of being seen. The bittersweet taste of truth, finally spoken, not as revenge, but as release. Because I didn't go to that gala for revenge. I didn't need applause, or validation, or a public apology from Claire. I had faced death more times than I could count. I had seen men beg for forgiveness moments before the end. I had held comrades in my arms and whispered their names so they wouldn't die alone. Nothing that happened in that ballroom compared. But still, something shifted. Something healed. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way. No sweeping music. No warm embraces. Just a quiet knowing, I am not who they said I was. And I never was. They can keep their stories, their pictures, their filtered lives. I have mine. As we crossed the river, I thought about my mother, about the last voicemail she left me 5 years ago. Short, dismissive. We're worried, Evie. You need help. You need to stop this fantasy. Claire said you think the government is using you. Call us back. I never did, and I wouldn't now. Because sometimes, peace isn't a conversation. It's silence. The SUV slowed near a quiet overlook above the city. The driver stopped. He didn't ask why. I stepped out and stood at the edge, the lights below twinkling like a different galaxy. And I let the night hold me. This was my truth. I had become someone worth knowing. Even if no one in my family ever truly did. Even if Claire never looked at me again. Even if my name was whispered only in classified halls and buried files. I closed my eyes and breathed. That night, my sister finally saw me. Not as broken, not as paranoid, but as what I had always been. The one they forgot to fear. The one they should have believed. And maybe, in some distant future, years from now, when the weight of silence becomes too loud for her, she'll find my name again. In a book, a document, a story half told. And she'll remember how she looked at me, how she said nothing, and how it was already too late. Because I was never the one who disappeared. She was. She just never noticed until the world said my name.